Have you ever had food from a restaurant that was so good that you just wanted to keep going back? The employees were so nice, the ambiance and the decor is beautiful, the music playing in the background is good, and most of all, the food is to die for. Good old Southern cooking. I'm talking the food is so good that you sit and wonder what are the chefs doing back there. Then you figure out exactly what the chefs are doing back there. The sweet, beautiful lady who always greets you with a warm smile when you walk in and always makes sure you have a little extra gravy on your mashed potatoes like you like is adding something a little extra to her food. But not necessarily yours. To her husband's, plural, her mother-in-law, and her own daughter. This is the story of the Voodoo chef, Anjette Lyles. Born August 23rd, 1925, year Virgos, in Macon, Georgia, Anjette was the only daughter to Jetta Watkins and William Donovan, parents who owned a produce company. Her early life went pretty smoothly. There was no drama about her family around town. This was a small town at the time, so everybody knew everybody. Wasn't nothing suspicious going on with them. Financially stable, Anjette was pretty popular in high school. She was known to be beautiful and very involved. Nothing suspicious stood out during my research of her early life. In 1947, when Anjette was 22 years old, she met and married Ben Lyles, who owned Lyles Restaurant located on Mulberry Street in Macon, Georgia. This restaurant has been in his family for years and was started by his late father. So of course, with Ben and Anjette being married, Anjette found herself very involved in the restaurant, learning about the food industry, working in the restaurant, helping out when they were short of staff, really learning the ropes and being involved in the day-to-day operations of the restaurant. And the customers loved her. Like I said before, she was known to be very beautiful. She's described as having a buxom figure, and she knew it, so she wore clothes that flattered her figure. And everyone just found her so interesting, so attractive, and most of all, just nice and welcoming when they visited the restaurant. So not only was the food good, but seeing Anjette and talking to her was pretty good as well. The business was booming, and so was Ben and Anjette, because they later had two daughters by the name of Marcia and Carla. So business and personal life was going pretty good until Ben, Anjette's husband, developed a drinking problem. He was drinking way more than usual, and combining that with the injuries that he suffered from serving in World War II, it was just a bad combination. He wasn't able to work as much as he used to, which led Anjette to have more pressure and more of a workload on herself to keep the restaurant up and running. And that's exactly what she did. She took on more hours. She covered more shifts. She was all over the place, welcoming, serving, and even cooking sometimes, just trying to make sure the restaurant was able to sustain itself with it being one man short, and that man just so happened to be the owner. She was working so much to the point that she would have her baby in one arm, rocking her, working, and even while she was pregnant with her second daughter as well. She wanted to make sure that this restaurant stayed a success, and it was doing pretty good. So everyone knew that the restaurant was still a success, still operating well, except for Ben Lyles. I guess he thought, well, since I'm sick, this restaurant can't be surviving without me. So he up and sold the restaurant without even notifying Anjette. She just woke up one morning to find out that they no longer own Lyles Restaurant. This sale took place in 1951, and Anjette was pissed. So along with the restaurant going down the drain, so was Ben's health. January 23rd, he was admitted into the hospital. He had a bloody nose, swollen limbs, vomiting, delirious. He was just down bad. So bad to the point 2 days later, on January 25th, Ben Lyles passed away. And before his passing, there was a back and forth of him being sick, then all of a sudden getting better. He would have benefits from him being a veteran. Then they said, well, listen, your doctor said you're good enough to work, so we're no longer going to give you your benefits. Then he would get sick again where he couldn't work. So it was just a back and forth with him being able to have money to sustain himself, which probably led to him having to sell the restaurant since he was no longer getting his work benefits, even though Anjette was making sure that the restaurant stayed afloat. So not only did Anjette lose the restaurant, she lost her husband, no income, So she knew she had to take on another job. She was familiar with the restaurant industry, so she decided to take on another job working at a different restaurant, and she worked her butt off for years. So much to the point 3 years later, she was able to buy back Lyles restaurant, but it's no longer known as Lyles restaurant. It is called Anjette's. Of course. So of course, with Macon being a small town at this time, everyone was so proud of her because they're looking at her like, look at this widow who just lost her husband. She lost the restaurant, no income. She worked her butt off to buy back this restaurant, and during this time to see a woman do that, they were like, bravo. So they supported her even more with this new adventure, and business was back booming with what was once known as Lyles restaurant to Anjette. The grand opening day of Anjette's restaurant, she met her next husband, who was hypnotized by her beauty, Joe Neil Gabbard. He was an airline pilot, and they later married in 1955. A lot of people didn't support this marriage because they're like, okay, we see you back on your feet after you lost your husband, but you just lost your husband and you just met this man and you just got married. You don't think you moving pretty fast? And along with that too, side note, like I said, this was a small town at the time, so not only were they concerned about how quick she married this man, Joe, like I said, was an airline pilot, so he was gone a lot of the time. And Anjette had needs that needed to be met, so it was rumors swirling around that she was sleeping around on Joe, but that's a side note. I don't think that really got much to do with the story, but just to let you know what was going on. Just a few months later, Joe had been admitted into the hospital, but for a minor surgery, a very small operation. But this operation that meant to be quick and easy didn't go as smoothly. After coming out of the operation, he broke out with a really bad rash all over his body that was very itchy. The more he scratched it, the worse that it became. The doctors associated this rash with an allergic reaction he may have had from the anesthesia, but this rash was all over his body. There was a nurse that had to come in, and he agreed to have this nurse tie his hands up so he could stop scratching the itch, and it did make it better. Eventually, without the irritation of him scratching the rash began to fade away, and Joe began to get a little better. But when Joe got home, the rash came back 10 times worse. Anjette and Julia is Ben's mother, her first husband's mother. She was still around helping Anjette out with the children, helping out with the home. That's how she was able to work so hard before in order to buy back the restaurant. So she was still sticking around, helping Anjette with her grandchildren and the upkeep of the house, and also helping out in situations like this with her second husband, with them trying to figure out where is this rash coming from. They needed extra assistance, so the nurse would come in once a day trying to figure out what's going on. Why is he breaking out again? What's causing it? It was first the anesthesia, but now that's well out of his system, so what's causing this allergic reaction? Joe's condition got way worse. He couldn't move his limbs. He had to be fed through a tube, and his veins ended up collapsing. And the nurse told Julia and Anjette, if he doesn't get to the hospital, he's gonna die. He was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. On December 2nd, 1955, Joe Neil Gabbard, Anjette's second husband, passed away. So Julia, Anjette's mother-in-law from her first husband Ben, stepped up even more to help out Anjette with the upkeep of the house, the children, the restaurant, because now she just lost her husbands back to back. She know that Anjette must be going through a lot, so she helped out as much as possible until she became ill. One day at work, she became very sick, vomiting blood. She became very dizzy. Anjette took her back home, and then she had to rush her to the hospital on August 28th, 1957, due to symptoms of pigmentation of the skin and peripheral neuropathy. So now Anjette again is looking after another loved one who has fell sick, but not for long. September 29th, 1957, Julia, her mother-in-law, passed away. So of course the community of Macon, Georgia showed Anjette a lot of support. Not only did she lose her two husbands, but now she lost her mother-in-law who was assisting her during this time, and they just felt it was a series of bad luck. But then it seemed to slow down for a year. Things were going well until another loved one fell ill. March 2nd, 1958, it was a regular day at the restaurant. Anjette brought her babies with her, Marcia, 9 years old, and Carla, 7 years old. It was a regular day of them helping out around, cleaning off the tables, greeting people, doing as much as kids can do. Then Marcia developed a bad cough. She was complaining she had a bad headache. She wanted to go home. But of course, Anjette wanted to stay at the restaurant because she doesn't have as much help as before. If she leaves, she'll have to shut down the whole restaurant. So she just gave her daughter a spoonful of sugar dipped in whiskey and had her eat it, trying to help her get rid of some of the symptoms and maybe give her a kick to make her feel better, so she could continue to help. That didn't work. Eventually, Anjette did have to take Marcia home, where she grew even more sick. She was vomiting blood. She was getting even more dizzy, could barely even walk straight. Anjette is doing as much as she can to try to make her feel better. But 3 days later, she had to be admitted into the hospital. But she was admitted into the same hospital that her father, her stepfather, and her grandmother died in. Even in the same exact room that all three of them were in. So Anjette is looking at this room like, oh no, I remember this room number. This is bad luck. We need to get her out of here. Something is going on with this room. Can we get her room changed? And the nurses are like, no, she needs to be on this floor because she's having similar symptoms that everyone else has. So this is the floor that she needs to be on. So Anjette is getting worried. She's like, oh my gosh, this room is bad luck. My daughter's about to die. Everyone I love died in this room. It has to be something up with this room. So Anjette just settled with the thought, yep, my daughter's about to die. And you may be thinking, okay, as a mother, shouldn't you be thinking a little bit more optimistic, trying to keep hope alive? 20 days later, Marcia is still in the hospital. She's still sick. But Anjette decides to take this opportunity to start making funeral arrangements. She started picking out her casket. Oh, we're going to get this casket. Oh, the children's choir at church should sing. Oh, I'm going to have her wear this dress. Oh, we could use this picture for the obituary. Doing full-on funeral arrangements while her daughter is still breathing. Even though Marcia is still breathing, she is still suffering from symptoms of oral bleeding, vomiting, and kidney failure, delusions. The delusions were so vivid that she felt that monsters were attacking her at night. She would see insects crawling from her body, and she would see worms crawling out of her hands. Like, she was getting very vivid delusions. As a mother, you may be concerned, like, is she having a bad reaction to the medicine you guys are giving her and what's causing these delusions? But Anjette was just like, she's so silly. She doesn't see any of that. That's hilarious. She would just laugh at it. Family members, people of the community, friends would bring balloons, get well cards, flowers. They would drop them off. They'll be like, oh, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. But when they would leave, Anjette would just walk around throwing all the flowers, popping the balloons, throwing the cards away. So one of the nurses seen her do that, and she's like, hey, why are you throwing all this nice stuff away? And she's like, oh, my daughter's going to die soon. She won't be needing this. Like, she was for certain that her daughter was going to die. And she was right. April 5th, 1958, Marcia, Anjette, and Ben Lyles' daughter passed away. With this devastating news, it was told that Anjette showed no sign of remorse, not a tear shed, nothing. She just continued on with the funeral arrangements that she already made. Now, this is what made people of Macon, Georgia a little suspicious. So they started thinking, okay, I get your first husband. You knew he was sick, so maybe you had time to prepare yourself. Your second husband, you just lost your first one. Maybe you're numb to the feeling. Your mother-in-law, y'all not really close like that. We heard you gossiping about her. Maybe that didn't hit as hard. But your daughter, and you're just going on about your day like everything is normal. That's when people started to raise a brow and knew something was up. And this is a town where barely any crime happened. People left their doors unlocked. Everybody knew everybody. It was a slow moving small town, so they had all the time in the world to start paying attention and keeping an eye on Anjette to see what they could piece together. So one day while cleaning, Anjette's housekeeper found a bottle of ant poison, and she knew that Anjette brought it for the restaurant. So she asked one of the employees, like, oh, when did you guys start having an ant problem? Where are they coming from? Like, are you guys going to have to close down? Like, how bad is it? And the employee's like, we don't have an ant problem. I've never even seen an ant in the building before. What are you talking about? And the housekeeper's like, I found a full big old bottle of ant poison that Anjette brought for the restaurant. It's not for the restaurant. And this is when the employee was like, ant poison. Just sitting around her house. Okay. And then one day, one of the employees, we don't know which one, I'm assuming the one who found out about the ant poison, wrote an anonymous letter to Anjette's aunt. Like I said, everybody knew everybody. Then this letter was then sent to the coroner of Bibb County. In this letter, it states that, hey, I think Anjette is poisoning these people. It's kind of suspicious that everyone is just suddenly passing away. They're having similar symptoms of throwing up, dizziness. I think she's poisoning them. And now the coroner, the toxicologist, the doctors know that they have something else to look out for with all of these sudden deaths. And Anjette was made aware of this letter that was sent out from one of her employees. And she was just like, oh, okay. All right. Like, she showed no reaction. And they're like, okay, you not. If you're innocent, usually you would be like, oh my gosh, you would say that. I brought that ant poison for this, or I would never. She was just like, okay. If that's what the letter said, then that's what the letter said. But you could tell there was some concern because the next day she visited Dr. Campbell and she had her other daughter, Carla, tell this doctor, oh, you know, me and my sister and some friends, we would play doctor, and sometimes for medicine, we would use the ant poison to give like as medicine to make people feel better, and you actually have to take the medicine. Like, she was made this girl make up a story about how they were using ant poison as a form of medicine when they were playing doctor. So Dr. Campbell is like, okay, well, you need to tell these friends that you were playing with, you need to tell their parents that they may be getting sick as well because all of this stuff that's happening with everyone else. So Anjette is like, okay, I'll make sure I give them a call. She ran over to the phone and she called them saying, hey, my daughters and your kids, they were playing around with some ant poison. I don't want the same thing to happen to my daughters to happen to your kids. Just take them to the doctor to get a checkup, make sure they're okay. And Anjette is like, okay, I made the phone call. Also, while I'm here, there was a letter found in my mother-in-law's bag. And in this letter, she states that she's the reason behind her son's death and her death as well. And she's very sorry. She just wanted to, you know, end it all, I guess. So she randomly found a letter that was written by her mother-in-law that's stating that she's the reason behind her son's death and her death as well. So Anjette is pulling all of these excuses out the bag, trying to cover her behind, but it's later going to catch up with her. So now ant poison is in the picture. The toxicologist got involved because now they have something specific to look for, because one of the main ingredients that was causing the reaction and the deaths in ant poison is arsenic. And usually if you don't know what you're looking for, you won't be able to find it. You have to specifically go in and look for arsenic chemicals, which can cause death. And of course they didn't see it before, so they analyzed tissue from Marcia's body and they found a high level of arsenic. And they ran the same test on Ben, Joe, and Julia, and they all had high levels of basically ant poison in their system. Then on May 6, 1958, Anjette was charged with 4 counts of murder. Again, Anjette showed no sign of remorse and denied everything, even though she had a substantial amount of evidence against her. The prosecutors felt that Anjette's motive behind this was financial gain, because like in all my stories, guess what? For each death, she was receiving some money from their life insurance policy. So after her first husband's death, Ben, she received $12,000, which is equivalent to $140,000 in value during that time. And 3 days before Joe's death, the insurance company received a letter from Joe making sure that his premium was up to date. Then after a handwriting analysis was done, come to find out that was not Joe's handwriting that wrote the letter or even signed the letter. It was Anjette's. But from Joe, she received a life insurance payout as well. Then a few days after they got married, Anjette made sure that Joe made her the beneficiary of his life insurance policy. And after he passed away, she received over $10,000 after his death. And then another $10,000 because there was a second policy that was taken out as well. Now for Julia, you may be thinking, how did she receive any type of life insurance policy? Because she technically wasn't related. Shouldn't the grandkids get some money? But no, while Julia was still alive after losing Ben, she used Ben's death as an excuse, like, Julia, you know, you're getting older. I feel like you need to write a will out just in case. This death kind of made me nervous. And Julia didn't want to think about that, of course, because she just lost her son. She doesn't even want to think what will happen when she goes. She's not in the mindset to prepare for it. But somehow, some way, there was still a will that was made for Julia. But this will was dated August 20th, 1957, and around this time, Julia was so paralyzed that she could even barely feed herself or barely even breathe, let alone hold a pen and be in the right mindset to write out an entire will. But Anjette was made the beneficiary of her estate, and she received over $11,000 after Julia's death. There was tracing paper found in Anjette's home that matched the same paper that the will was written on, and there was a new policy that was taken out on her daughter Marcia, where guess who was the beneficiary? Anjette. While the trial was going on, there were so many witnesses who stepped up to speak out. A doctor testified who stated that the rash found on Joe's body was consistent with dermatitis caused by arsenic chemicals. Even a patient testified that just so happened to be a lawyer, stated that Anjette was more concerned about him helping out Joe to make a will than she was concerned about Joe being on his last breath. A nurse testified that Anjette would sometimes walk around boasting about the money that she was about to get from the life insurance policy. And she's told the nurse to make sure that if anybody asks, to state that Joe received the best care possible. She would gossip with the nurse, talking about how much she hated her mother-in-law, how she wished she was dead. She's so annoying. A owner of a car dealership even testified because Anjette inquired about a car, and when it came down to talking about the down payment, she said, "Oh, don't worry, I'll have the money in about a month. My mother-in-law should be dying soon." Just upfront with it. Many people stated how Anjette hated Joe's guts, her second husband, and would have divorced him if he didn't die. Some customers and employees in the restaurant also testified right before she would go visit whatever victim was in the hospital at the time. She would make their drinks and their food, which looks normal to bringing them food, but she would go to the bathroom, and around the toilet, she would take their food and drinks there first and then come out and then go to the hospital to visit them. So they suspect that maybe she would go back in the bathroom, sprinkle some of the ant poison in the drinks and in the food. And there was one witness who even stated that they seen her put the ant poison in there, stir it up when she came back out. She sniffed it to make sure it was the right amount, and she even let it touch her lips to make sure it had the right type of reaction to it. And the next day when she came into work, right where she let the ant poison juice touch her lip, she had breakouts right there. And as far as the daughters, you would think, oh, she came in with her daughter so they could help out around the restaurant. But specifically with Marcia, and I'm assuming maybe because she looked most like her father, she would tell her, "You little Lyles son of a bitch, I'll kill you if that's the last thing I do." And she would consistently take out her frustrations on Marcia. And you know, the housekeeper testified as well. She even shared a story with some of her friends that she saw Anjette prepare and get excited to go to funerals as if it was an actual activity to do. She loved going to funerals, specifically ones where women lost their children or their husbands, just because she liked seeing the attention that they would get, how everyone would be surrounding her and comforting her, and almost like as if she was a queen for a day. Because it is told that there are only several occasions where a woman is felt like a queen for a day during that time. That was childbirth, her wedding day, or the day she lost her husband or one of her children. So many people think that she was consistently reaching for that gratitude, that satisfaction, that attention. Like I said before earlier, she grew up very beautiful. She got a lot of attention on how she looks. So I don't know, as she got older, did she feel like she was missing out on that attention or wanted more? Many people described her as a narcissist. The housekeeper kept talking as well. Anjette tried to make a plan with her for her to say that she's the one that found the will in Julia's purse. The mother-in-law, how they suddenly found the will. Anjette wanted the housekeeper to say, "Yes, I'm the one that found the will in Julia's purse. I know it's from her because she only leaves her bags here. No one touches it." And so the housekeeper's like, "Okay, I got you. I'll have your back." The housekeeper got on the stand and said, "Yeah, so Anjette wanted me to lie and say that I found the will. I ain't found no will. I don't know what will she talking about. I don't know what purse she talking about. The only thing I found was the ant poison. And when I found the ant poison, that's when I talked to one of the employees, and the employees said that they ain't never even seen no ant. So that's when I got concerned, trying to figure out why in the world this girl lady got ant poison. I know I clean the house good, so I know she ain't got no ants for me. So what was the ant?" Like, the housekeeper, so much information came out from her. Also, while searching her home, where they found the tracing paper that she utilized to forge the signature of Julia and the signature of Joe as well, they also found voodoo related items in her home, different voodoo dolls, different candles, different oils and herbs. And people in the community also said sometimes when they would visit the restaurant, they would hear her chanting in the back, and when they tried to peep through the kitchen to see what she was doing, she would be surrounded by a bunch of candles and poking at voodoo dolls. But that was not proven, of course, because many times voodoo cannot be proven. So that was just seemed as a rumor, but several people had the same story. So with all of this evidence, all these testimonies, Anjette was found guilty and sentenced to death by an electric chair. Again, she showed no sign of remorse when the sentence was read. Anjette was even examined herself by a psychiatrist, where they found her to be psychotic and insane. They described her as a chronic paranoid schizophrenic. And her sentence was commuted to involuntary commitment, and she was sent to a Central State Hospital in Milledgeville, Georgia, to treat her mental illness. Many people debated, is she really mentally ill or is she just a good actress? Because one of the friends that she made in the hospital stated that Anjette said that she will never let people think that she was sane because of the sentence and the consequences she will have to face. So she's always going to have people think that she's just some crazy lady who killed her loved ones and not in her right mind. Anjette later died on December 4th, 1977 at the age of 52 by a heart attack. When I first started this series on true crime that involves any type of witchcraft or voodoo, I did not suspect for so many of them. I feel like all of them so far to involve some type of death that they done for life insurance. If you guys know any other stories that maybe have to do with like a crazy pastor, a cult leader, something else that was done, or maybe some deaths that were done due to sacrifices and not necessarily life insurance policies. Also, since I'm a little baby that listen, I saw a lot of y'all saying that I needed to add pictures to these stories. So y'all let me know, do y'all prefer this way of me doing the true crime with some pictures along the side? But you guys let me know down below if you are familiar or you know of any true crime mystical cases that you want me to cover. Let me know down below. Let me know what you think about Anjette. She crazy. You killed your daughter. I feel like that's the sickest one so far. But you guys let me know down below what you think of this video. And like I always say, as above, so below, as within, so without, as the universe or the soul. Until next time, you guys, I share, baby.